Hello again and welcome to part C of situation analysis, the problem 3 analysis, and this is part 1 of it. In the former lesson, we stressed the importance of using a conceptual framework to guide data and information collection and analysis that provides the foundation for the remainder of our course. Developing a theory of change is a multi-step process that begins with having a well-organized, comprehensive picture of the assets, of the resources, motivation, capacities, and needs of a society, community, household, or even individuals, depending on the scales at which you are working at. With this background established in the former lessons, basically regarding the conceptual framework that you could use to gather this information, we now move on to causal analysis and problem trees, where your groups will begin to see the theory of change taking shape. This lecture focuses on using the organized information that you have gathered to identify the overarching problem, the key problems and causes of those problems in a hierarchical flow. Having said this, the lecture objectives are then to understand how causal analysis is used to create a problem tree, to practice drafting concise problem statements for all the problem levels that you find, to critically analyze and organize the problems and causes in a logical flow, and to identify strong and weak causal linkages in drafting your problem trees. Here is once again the roadmap for your orientation. What we're aiming at in this lecture, in this module, is that you learn how to analyze and design integrated projects. Integrated projects that have a holistic problem analysis in the background. An holistic or comprehensive problem analysis improves your ability to design and implement integrated projects that increase the resilience to shocks and improve food and nutrition security. In the case of our lectures example, we are always talking about food security and nutrition security, so I will keep on using these examples basically. This holistic problem analysis does not necessarily mean that we have to implement bigger and broader projects. It simply means that the team, your group, has to look at the bigger picture to identify the most effective response and approach. Understanding this big picture is critical to the development of a good theory of change, because an effective diagram, let's say, of all the problems and issues that prevail in your region will portray a holistic picture of how a goal may be reached, including the efforts of other actors, most importantly. Integrated projects refer to a non-sectoral, cross-sectoral approach, with sectors and stakeholders working together to address key leverage points and adopting complementary strategies to address these common issues. By layering and integrating and sequencing initiatives from you and from other actors, you can further achieve each of the objectives to a greater extent than by programming all of it in isolation. An holistic problem analysis relies on rigorous causal analysis, the identification of common constraints and opportunities, feedback loops, and underlying causes of the overarching problem. The process furthermore allows project planners to identify the pathways between causes and effects, including cross-causal linkages between problems. For example, why might a community experience low income security? Perhaps the causes leading to this problem include negative health issues, low crop production, or any other number of factors that are not directly within the more obvious finance or economic pathway. Any problem that interacts with one part of a system also interacts with other parts of the system. So, holistic problem analysis always aims to investigate the cross-causal linkages. Summarizing, once the data and information about the region has been gathered and organized, vulnerable populations have been identified and trends have been determined, remember your essay number 1, it is time for the causal analysis. And once more, an effective theory of change will portray an holistic picture of how a goal may be reached, including the efforts of other actors. Once more, summarizing the importance of causal analysis. Causal analysis will help you to understand why problems exist, will explore cause-effect pathways, including most important cross-causal linkages, and you have to develop a hierarchical relationship between these causes and effects. You will, at the end of the work, identify which causes can be acted upon by your project. How to create a problem tree. To start, we want to prioritize an overarching problem. This is basically the main problem that we have found out already in your essay number 1. Generally, we use 2 main criteria for prioritizing an overarching problem. So these notions, these conclusions you may have taken already in your essay number 1. We use the main criteria of the significance of scope of the problem and the degree to which solving the problem will lead to the improvements or well-being of the affected population. If you work for a development agency or donor call, the overarching problem that can be chosen, or the problems that can be chosen, are normally predetermined in the results frameworks of these institutions. Remember, for example, the IUCN global results. IUCN teams will work for goals, main objectives, or main overarching problems already defined in their global results frameworks. Remember, one of the overarching problems that IUCN wants to target was the high risk faced by species in an ecosystem. Other agencies have different priorities and predetermined overarching problems, for example, food insecurity or degradation of natural resources and ecosystem services. So, depending on the type of agency to which you are drafting a proposal or the type of call for which you are applying, you will have already overarching results framework to which you have to comply to. The key problems are the broad conditions or causes that directly contribute to an overarching problem. Let's say if we're talking about food security, this will be low income or poor health status of the population in cause, or low agricultural productivity. All of those are contributing to the overarching problem of food insecurity. Underlying causes are those causes that are inducing these key problems, that are causing these key problems, are preconditions for the appearance of these key problems. They may be related to human behavior or to systemic weaknesses that contribute to these key problems. For example, a city or rural region may appear to have the same overarching problem, let's say food insecurity, as well as the same key problems as other regions, let's say low income, poor yields, or poor nutritional status of the population. But yet, the specific underlying causes of these key problems and constraints that need to be addressed, they may differ from region to region, from place to place, or group to group. So they are specific to your region, to the target region that you are addressing. We must look for context-specific underlying causes of these key problems. The underlying causes can be of the behavioral type, like attitudes characterized by cultural habits, like being risk or innovation averse attitudes, or could be regarding to lack of knowledge or lack of skills, or they can be systemic, like capacities of governmental institutions in promoting sustainable farming, or poor public policies regarding food security and nutrition. So there is a whole spectrum of underlying causes that have different roots and that should be addressed in a comprehensive, holistic approach of the problem tree development. Contextual conditions are those social, economic, political, or natural conditions that cannot be influenced by the project, but still influence all of the above underlying causes that contribute to the key problems and overarching problem, and even at times result from the overarching problem some feedback loop, some ill cycle of vulnerability. For example, climate change effects may be impacting hard on the local populations in the project region, but there is nothing that your project can do to revert the situation of climate change. The project cannot change climate change. So the project can only help to adapt or to mitigate, according to its scale, the negative situation created by climate change. But there is no direct action at the scale of your project that can change the situation of climate change happening. A conceptual framework can help you to develop your problem tree. Imagine the resilience framework given before in the lecture. In this slide, you can see a guide to your problem tree analysis. It can be seen as a problem tree in the horizontal position. Imagine that. Is a top-down approach. We would start then by identifying the overarching problem and key problems, and only afterwards moving down and asking, well, what is causing these key problems and overarching problem? What are the underlying causes? You would go through the whole spectrum of possible underlying causes that may be causing these key problems and overarching problem in a causal relationship. You should be then ordering them in a causality relationship. And only afterwards you identify the contextual factors that act upon all these causal underlying causes, but to which your project has no influence. The aim is to achieve a representation of the problematics in your region that is complex and explicit in the causality between the different underlying causes that you have found. Something of the kind, something complex, should be the aim of the exercise. We first prioritize an overarching problem, and then we identify the key problems and their underlying causes. It is a top-down approach, as I said to you before. You can imagine being the facilitator of a development agency working in a certain region. For example, imagine you are working for the IUCN and you should facilitate a workshop to produce a situation analysis. So facilitating a workshop means conducting mostly brainstorms together with stakeholders that are participating there for formulating a problem analysis. And in there, you should start by asking everybody to write down their opinion on the overarching problem that should be targeted. Every stakeholder would afterwards write down his opinion on the right formulation of an overarching problem in a card and pin it on a wall according to his opinion on the importance of that overarching problem. After everybody has pinned up his card with his formulation, you should then discuss with everybody, looking at this wall where the opinions of everybody is pinned up, and you should then try to choose the most important overarching problem, the one that should be chosen for this particular project. And you should as well work together with the stakeholders on the best formulation, the most appropriate formulation for this overarching problem. You would possibly find many different formulations for the same problem, and you have to find a middle way to select the most appropriate formulations, but everything should be in a participatory way. Afterwards, after you have identified the overarching problem from this partial brainstorming, you then would move afterwards to also, in a participatory way, identifying the key problems and underlying causes, also by letting the workshop participants to brainstorm, to write their opinions on pinned cards, to pin these pinned cards, and only afterwards you would organize them, you would try to organize them in key problems, and then from each key problem downwards, the underlying causes that are causing these key problems in a causality pathway. So this is an exercise that has to be done with stakeholders in a very participatory way, that everybody feels participating and everybody has ownership on the results that the group is producing. So you should simulate the same situation in the work occurring in our group work for this module. Overarching problems, they are basically selected on criteria like the significance or scope of the problem, the number of people that are being impacted, and the degrees to which society considers it a serious problem. So this issue, you can capture this issue from the workshop participants, which will be expressing this in the brainstorming. Also, the degree to which the resolution of the problem will result in well-being improvements for the impacted groups, and etc. They're all things that you can take out of the brainstorming when you're doing the workshop as a facilitator for the development agency that you are working for. Of course, if the development agency has already predetermined overarching problems to which they work towards, like food nutrition and food and nutrition insecurity or increased risks faced by species and ecosystems, so the overarching problem is somehow predetermined, the brainstorming with stakeholders will go more on analyzing the key problems and the underlying causes that are causing these overarching problems. The same if you are drafting a proposal for a donor would be then the same. The results frameworks of these institutions, they are more or less given at the higher levels, at the level of the goals, and you would have to discuss with the stakeholders the underlying causes, the specific problems that are causing these overarching problems. An important thing that you have to have in mind when formulating statements about overarching problems is that we should always include mentions about the what, the who, and where. For example, food insecurity of vulnerable pastoralist households in the Fafan zone of Ethiopia. So here you see exactly the what. We're talking about food insecurity. You also see who, the target groups that are being affected by this situation. These are the vulnerable pastoralist households in the Fafan zone. And where? In Ethiopia, in the Fafan zone of Ethiopia, right? So you should always include this information when formulating overarching problem statements and even key problem statements. You should always give information about the what, the who, and the where these problems are happening. Here you have now the formal definitions, let's say, about the problem structure in elements for a causality analysis. I've spoken about them before, but maybe you didn't got the right formulation. So here once more written down for your information. Also, don't forget when creating a problem tree, you always go top down. First, you brainstorm on the overarching problem. Maybe if you're working for a development agency or a donor call, this overarching problem is already pre-formulated. So you start by brainstorming on the broad conditions, the key problems that are causing this overarching problem. After this, you go down to work on the specific conditions of the region where you're working at that are causing these key problems that on their turn cause the overarching problem. And only afterwards you take care about the contextual conditions like climate change, social, cultural, environmental, and political factors. These things that cannot be addressed by your project. So once more, top-down, overarching problem, broad conditions, specific conditions, and the contextual factors or contextual conditions. Here's a simple example of a top-down approach where the more one goes down through the causal stream, the more underlying causes are found that feed into this larger problem. This is only a small example. Several other underlying causes could be here as well, causing low food availability, besides only declining crop yields. Also, other underlying causes could be contributing to declining crop yields, besides soil erosion. For example, lack of water could be another one. The example is kept simple for your understanding, but it should be more complex than what is here showed. The example shows nevertheless the different types of underlying causes you may find, those that are specific to the region in which you are working. For example, low food availability can be found in many regions, but in your region there are specific underlying conditions that are causing this. Here, these are the declining crop yields due to soil erosion. Another example on how you should proceed with the top-down approach. The more you go down through the causal stream, the more underlying causes are found that feed into the larger problem, like I said before. So here, food insecurity could be as well being caused by reduced access to food. And reduced access to food, what is causing the reduced access to food? Low income affordability of the populations is one of the causes. And what is causing this? The low prices of crops. So they have declining crop yields and declining qualities. So this lowering the prices for crops, which is lowering the income, which is why they have a reduced access to food. What are other causes of low income? For example, no alternative livelihoods. People, especially women, are not educated, so they don't have capacities for engaging in other income activities. And why is this happening? This is happening because no institutions are offering business development training for small businesses for these people, especially for women, or because early marriage negatively affects girls' education, which leads to low wages for women. So you see, these are different types of underlying causes. Some of them are systemic, some of them are based on lack of knowledge and lack of skills. Some of them have to do with behavioral practices, with cultural issues. Some of those are systemic, like I said before.